Today we're going to work on taking one credible and relevant source and stretching it out into multiple related sources that we can use throughout our investigation. This activity is known as stretching your sources. First thing we should do is thank the creator of Stretching Your Sources, Mr. Sean Byrne from Glenbard West High School in the suburbs of Chicago. This lesson plan was built out on a concept that Mr. Byrne introduced me to 2 years ago, and it has proven to be very valuable for my students. So what is the goal of stretching our sources? The ultimate goal is to take one great source and to turn it into 4 or even 5 sources. Let's take a look at a visualization of what it is that we're going to investigate. We're going to start with source A. That'll be our first individual source that we've located. We're going to find a way to connect it to a source B, a source C, source D, and source E. And we're going to go into detail as to what each one of those will represent as we go through the process. Step 1 is to locate a credible and relevant source from a leading expert in your field of study. I'm going to go ahead and provide you with an example here. My example for source A is going to be Working with Emotional Intelligence by Dr. Daniel Goleman. So that becomes source A, Working with Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Step 2 is to take the work of step A and locate a credible and relevant source which is cited in source A. When I read source A, Working with Emotional Intelligence, in there, I see very early on in the process that Dr. Goleman cites the work of Mr. McClellan, and this becomes my source B. The resource is Testing for Competence Rather Than Intelligence, which is a work by David McClellan, which is the foundation for the work that Mr. Goleman uses in emotional intelligence. So source B is cited by source A. Step 3 is to locate a credible and relevant source which cites source A. So this is someone who's now building on the work of Mr. Goleman, who had already built on the work that was cited in source B. My source C for this particular example would be How We Learn, Learning and Non-Learning in School and Beyond by Dr. Illerisk. Source C is cites source A. So source C builds on the work of source A. Step 4 is to identify an additional source produced by the author of source A, which is relevant to our source of inquiry or our topic of inquiry. So I already have one source by Dr. Daniel Goleman. My goal now, in order to identify a source D, is to go find an additional work that could relate to the discussion of emotional intelligence. What I was able to find with a very easy search is source D, Social Intelligence, which is another book written by Daniel Goleman. So this additional work by the author of source A becomes my source D. At this point, I already have 4 sources, which brings me around to step 5, or what I like to call the bonus round. Locate relevant critical analysis of source A by an additional source. And in this case, we end up with source E. Models of Emotional Intelligence by J.D. Meyer, P. Solovi, D. Caruso, and R.J. Sternberg. This is analysis of source A. What I've ended up with is a model where I have taken one source, Working with Emotional Intelligence, which is my source A, and now I've been able to turn it into 5 sources that are all credible, all relevant to my topic of inquiry, and all related. So they could be connected in their perspectives, although they might have differing viewpoints. Source A cites the work of source B. Source C cites the work of source A. Source D is by the same author as source A, and then source E is critical analysis of source A. This is a simple system for taking one good source and then turning it into 5 credible and relevant sources that will help you to establish your own credibility as a researcher who's aware of the ongoing conversation within your field. I hope this helps.